Today's session is about lay leadership. And I know it's a little ironic and weird for a clergy person to come and talk about lay leadership. But here's the deal. Kay and I wrote these materials together because we wanted to have that clergy and lay perspective together. We noticed that a lot of books, a lot of resources were written for clergy. And that's not particularly helpful from the lay point of view. We also noticed, as a superintendent, I noticed that sometimes it was the clergy holding back churches, or laity waiting for the clergy to act and just saying, what's your vision? And the clergy are brand new and they're like, I don't know, I haven't met y'all yet. And so the laity, we need to talk about how lay ownership of God's mission. And so that's the core of today's session. How many of y'all are laity here? How many are laity? Awesome! That's okay. How many here are clergy who want to find out what laity really think? Okay, a few of you here. Okay, gotcha. Totally. Yeah. Awesome. So let me share so I told you kind of the strategic why. Let me share the heart why. The heart why. I was appointed to a church in Russellville, Arkansas. When I got there, on the stats it said 90-something in worship. When I got there, they went, then we had that at Easter maybe. So the average worship was really closer to 50, maybe 60 on a good day, with no rain and all that. And it's certainly not a Razorback game day. So, I mean, you get the idea. So I went and started to do what I was taught to do in seminary, and that is to do ministry in the church. Do you already hear the problem there? Yes. And so one of the things that I carry on my soul is I didn't walk across the street. My job, as I understood it, was to maintain or grow or attract people to then make disciples of at the pastor of the church. I didn't walk across the street, and no one in the congregation cared or asked me about it, because we didn't see it either. We're all responsible for the harvest. We're all responsible to walk across the street, to walk across the room, to make disciples who disciple others. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we should understand that to have many in our lives, to understand that we're sinners in need of grace, all of us, to have authentic relationships. We're not just making disciple robots. We're forming discipling relationships, all as a community under the movement of the Holy Spirit. And to do that, we got to walk across the street. And so that's why, really, I've been thinking and talking and Kay and I writing about impact. Because Methodism started as a lay movement. It was truly a lay movement that reached millions. That's its whole history. You had a clergy person that showed up, every quarter, did some sacramental stuff, did some Marian if they needed to, served communion, that sort of thing. You get the idea. And then we would go off to the next church. And you know what? Under that system, the church grew like wildfire. And then we started stationing pastors in churches. And it's like that evangelism just stopped. And then we started requiring master's degrees of clergy. That was in the late 50s when we started requiring that as the standard. And it fit the idea of the context as we understood it of that day, post-war. But it, again, I can look at the stats. As soon as we started requiring master's degrees, the church started shrinking. We went from a lay-led movement to a professionalized clergy movement. And we stripped laity of missional ownership. And so my belief is that laity must step up and reclaim the role of lay ministry to have kingdom impact. And so this session today is going to have, and I don't know how I'm going to stuff it all in, but we'll figure it out together. The first couple of sections are about the larger culture and kind of the need. The next few sections that I'm going to share about are about specific areas, targeted areas of ministry, functions and systems of ministry in a church to make large impact. And the last two are definitely focused on the work of lay leadership and how lay leadership matters in a larger church. So with that understanding, though, I want to step back again. The role of laity is not to attend meetings. I know we're shocked. It's about partnering in leadership. Clergy are appointed to a mission field. That's part of my job. I write appointment letters. I send clergy to mission fields. I don't talk about sending clergy to congregations hardly at all. You'll hear me talk about being appointed to a mission field. But here's the thing. I believe laity are appointed to mission fields too. With your membership in the local church, your laity are no different. That's part of your calling. You've been ordained by your baptism as missionaries in a corner of God's kingdom that your church happens to be located in. That reclaiming that calling of the laity means to reclaim the mission of Jesus Christ and not just being busier at running the church or doing enough programs or filling slots on a nominations page. So as I said, professionalism of clergy has caused some problems there. Because now we have a professionalized clergy, laity, they'll look to the clergy first for answers about, what to do next and how to lead next and what's the latest blah, blah, blah research when, golly, y'all know your mission field. Clergy come in, we are a guest in a mission field, and sometimes it takes us years to figure it out. So it's going to have to be the laity that do that articulation and interpretation. It's not a new problem. And some of you heard me in a previous session, I talked about Acts 6. I talk about Acts 6 a whole lot. That's when the apostles had an opportunity. Remember, the Greek widows were not being fed well. People were complaining to the DS. They're saying the apostles aren't doing the job. They're not doing pastoral care. They're not visiting. I thought you said these are pastors who cared. The apostles, oh no, what's going to happen? And they could have freaked out and just doubled down on pastoral care, but they didn't. They had the diaconate, right? Select from among you a leadership corps. And you want to say, yeah.
In the laity reclaim.
Yes.
Where do you fit the clergy in that?
Okay.
Should we completely reclaim, or
Yeah.
should we...
I'll put a pin in that. Especially at the end, we talk about lay leadership and governance. Okay? So they had a choice. And the choice really was then tighten up horde ministry or share ministry. Stephen and the deacons, right? The diaconate was created. And then it says when the apostles let go of ministry, let go of hoarding of ministry, that's when the church started growing again. And I don't think it's any different today. So what are our hope-filled outcomes is a God-sized impact. I've had lots of vision teams. I've been with vision teams so much, whenever I hear the word vision team, I start to go, oh. I was talking with a church. They've been working with the vision team. They wanted to build a 5-year plan. Their vision team was in its 4th year of meeting. I know. So I got to the point where it says, I'm done with vision teams. Give me an impact team. Give me a team that's about making a real impact. And even if it means taking steps and tripping over your own feet and falling flat, at least you're falling flat forward. Because I'm tired of vision teams. And every pastor that comes in wants to start another vision team. No. Y'all are the experts of your mission field. Y'all are pros. We are facilitators in a process to help you articulate and then to set some priorities. That's the clergy-lay relationship there. So, Here's another one of my beliefs, and I believe it so much I wrote it down. Programs and buildings don't make disciples. Disciples make disciples. And of course, I say, God's in there too, of course. It's a Holy Spirit thing. But we have an artificial belief that if we just have a full calendar and nice buildings, disciples will somehow be created. Here's a problem with that. At one of my churches I served, we had this fern, like this greenery in the sanctuary. Now, those ferns, they heard every sermon preached. Never missed a Sunday. They were not disciples of Jesus Christ. And here's the thing. When I talk about programs and buildings not making disciples, that's helpful for us. How many folks here are in churches that worship under 150? Under 100? Under 75? Okay, thank you. So, and I could keep on going lower, but it gives on. So here's the thing. Small churches, you'll never out-program those big churches. You'll never do it. There are some churches that got all kinds of fancy programs. You will never out-program a large church. I served a church with 4,000 folks. We had lots of programs. I served churches that were, as I said, 60 folks. Not that many programs. But let me say what, small churches, you can never out-program a big church. You can out-relationship them every day of the week. Every day. You can create intimacy that is God-centered, and out of that intimacy, you can really build up disciples of Jesus Christ. So I'm really glad programs and buildings don't make disciples, because that would cut out most of the churches. But it's not true. Disciples make disciples. And at the end of the day, a disciple walking alongside a new disciple or a questioning disciple, if you really think about it, that's not a line item on the budget. That starts with being a soul issue. Are you willing to invest in the salvation of another person? Are you willing to invest what God's doing in another person? But let me step back, though, and let's talk about culture a little bit. Y'all have seen the stats, the rise of the nuns, and I don't mean those with habits and all that sort of thing. Really, what we're talking about, when we talk about cultural impact, I've been sitting in a lot of those. Again, I go to a lot of these church meetings. Most every time I go to one of these meetings, I hear about a couple of things. Usually, when we talk about the cultural and demographic changes we're seeing in our United States and the socioeconomic changes, the hollowing out of the middle class, pieces like that, it's usually how it affects the church. Oh, it affects our budget. It's going to affect us this way. It's going to. You see how I said that? We're thinking about the changes and how it's going to impact us. And we're very, very worried about us. And we're worried about our budgets and our comfort and our way of life and our keeping things the same. What I hear very little of when I hear about all those demographic changes is the opportunity that God has in all that. There's what I hear when I hear all those demographic changes. I'm starting to think there's a lot of folks who don't have great relationships because I've got teenagers. They're online a lot, and they're starving for authentic relationship. I'm hearing about socioeconomic changes of the hollowing of the middle class, where it's really hard to get ahead, and the idea of American dream is a fantasy. And folks that are hurt, folks that are suspicious, folks are wounded and broken. And I say, what is God already doing, and where are we in the midst of that? Or how are we responding to all these changes? Not for our benefit, but how does God need us as an instrument in people's lives going through all this that need to hear a word from Jesus? So I think we have an opportunity in the midst of all these changes that may be scaring us in our budgets, but really is an opportunity for Jesus to do some things. Now, of course, in the midst of that, I also know that our evangelism muscles have deteriorated. I I come from a generation, since I'm a Gen Xer, I was not around for school prayer. And those kind of things. All those systems that were in place in the 70s and before, that everything in society was designed. I mean, where I'm from the South, we had blue laws. Nothing was open on Sunday morning. Wednesday night, there was no homework. You get the idea. Everything was designed to drop people in church. I remember I was in seminary in Denver, and someone said, "Oh, they're starting Sunday morning soccer." And I laughed. I said, "It'll never happen in Arkansas." Yeah, right. So, I mean, there's all this kind of shifting. And so we let the culture do our evangelism for us. And we didn't have to. And our evangelism muscles deteriorated because we let the culture do our work instead of us doing the work God had for us. Also, I know that there is so many changes, it's hard to see our impact. I used to go to Lake Catherine in Arkansas, and I'd get up real early in the morning before there's any boats or anything out, and I'd skip stones. You ever skip stones? The best time to skip stones is early in the morning. There's not much movement. It's just a nice, calm lake. You can skip the stones. Very, very large sense of fulfillment there. Now, later in the day, there's ski boats, there's waves. I can skip the stones just as well. I can find the very perfect flat stones to do it. But because of all the waves and all the crashing around, I don't see my impact the way I used to. I think that's us too in church. There's so much commotion. There's so much commotion, so much busyness in the world. I think we're working the same or even harder, but we're just not seeing the impact. But here's the thing. I think that in the midst of all this change, in the midst of all the clutter and the busyness and the waves, I think we still have plenty of opportunity, plenty of kingdom impact to be done. So if we move from sustainability, what's this going to mean to us? And refocus on how can we make an impact? I think we can see some results. The first one of those I want to talk about is discipleship impact. And there's a lot of ways to do accountable discipleship, and class next door on it even. But the first thing I want to say in the idea of discipleship is, first of all, membership is not discipleship. We've been equating members with disciples because it's very institutional. I was working with a church, and they decided to do they called it a discipleship system. It was actually a membership system. And I knew that because they included lapel pins that you would get if you're I don't want to name the church, let's call it St. Arbuck's. I worship at St. Arbuck's every once in a while, y'all. Starbucks. Okay. Okay. Anyway, St. Arbuck's disciple had disciple on it. I have a lapel pin that says disciple. And that's because you signed a contract that said, those membership vows. It was before witness. Prayers, presence, gift, service. Witness wasn't in the discipline yet. In other words, if they did these things, and each of those was, I will attend this, I will pay this much in my giving, I will, if you read it all, nothing in that list was actually about growing as a disciple or growing another disciple. It was all about supporting the institution. And they called it a discipleship system. Well, by the time I got there, discipleship was a dirty word because it was about institutional membership and membership goals. It was like, are you living up to your Rotary vows, Rotary Club or something? Or are you turning in your dues? It became that language. So I want to double down with this. Membership is not discipleship. Instead, discipleship needs to be intentional, accountable, and impactful. There's a lot of systems. I do not have a particular one that is the one to use. because every church is different, every size church is different. I've shared before, I've done a lot of work with Church of Resurrection over the years because they're neighbors of ours in Arkansas, and them have a deep connection on how we do. It's gone back over a decade. They have a wonderful large system designed. I've learned how to scale it down, but you cannot drop a system that's designed for thousands of people into a church of 75. It doesn't work. So, and other systems are more based on like a coaching model or a peer model, a mentoring model. It's one-on-one, hand-in-hand. There's all kinds of systems, plenty. But you need to choose ones, as leaders, choose ones that fit your mission field, that will be impactful in your mission field, impactful inwardly on the soul of the disciple, and outwardly to make more disciples and to change the world. You need to go up one that helps people accountable to Christ and to actually fulfilling what it means to grow as a disciple. I still remember my first appointment. I found out that I was in charge of getting communion servers, 2 minutes before the worship service. So I went up and sit in my front row is Betty. So I say, Betty, could you be one of the communion servers with me? And she looked at me and said, oh, Blake, I'm just retired from all that. Now, let me be clear, no mobility issues. Betty's nothing like that. She thought somewhere along the line she got a gold watch. And she was done. And I noticed, I was there for a few years. Yep. In every point of her life, she'll show it. She'll be a fern. That was it. She gave up on being accountable to God to grow as a disciple. And that's a lifetime journey. Wesley had a gift of small groups, and we gave it away to non-denominationals, which is fine, great. God bless them. They're using it because we weren't. We were not. We gave up small group accountability, the opportunity to look at each other's eyes and ask, how goes your walk with Christ? And the answer, fine, is not allowed. To ask, what challenges are you facing in your Christ walk? I mean, that's accountability that is core to us. It's not a mess. It is the Wesleyan way to ask, how is your fruit? It is the Wesleyan way, and it is an opportunity now to reclaim it. We gave that up for a video teaching series, where we're going to come in and watch a video and very politely read our lesson from Cokesbury and pray and move on. We never ask other questions. We never go deeper. We never change the world. We never connect to the community because we're so busy learning pretty thoughts about Jesus. So the top one there is intentional. And that means it's planned out. It fits your culture and your context. It's not willy-nilly. Because let's say you have someone walk in your doors, and after you get your jaw off the ground and are shocked that a visitor would show up, that you'd have a guest, you go, whoa! What's your step then to connect them with others? What's your step then to help them grow as a disciple and become closer to Jesus? Maybe if they've never even seen a Bible before. What a challenge. What an opportunity. So one of the ways I've been using intentional discipleship is, and again, I stole this from my friends at Resurrection. And this was, knowing, loving, serving. That was, I started talking about this way before there were books out with them. But the idea of that knowing, loving, serving, the head, heart, hands, whatever, there's the idea of a fullness to discipleship there. Now, here's the thing about that intentional piece. Since we're so busy learning nice things about Jesus in our Sunday schools, and I hate the word Sunday school, by the way. I wish I could get rid of it. There's got to be a better term for this. So We think happy. So knowing, I think there is a piece about knowing. We need to learn about our faith. We need to learn about Scripture. We need to learn about the way how John Wesley and the Methodist movement is, I think, the best way of putting Matthew 25 and Matthew 28 together. I mean, I think we do it better than anybody. So we need to teach all of that. There is a knowing aspect. There also needs to be a loving aspect, a heart piece. How are we caring for each other? Are we expecting the pastor to do pastoral care? Or do we understand, are all of ourselves as responsible for congregational care? Put a pin in that one. I'll talk about that one later. How are we lifting each other up? How are we serving together? How are we changing the world, impacting our communities? Think of that knowing, loving, serving. Now, if it's intentional, what you can do in that is make sure every group is balanced out. You have a small group. What are they doing? You can call them together, have some coaching session with the leaders. What's your plan for the next 3 months, class leaders, on growing and knowing, growing and loving, and growing and serving? Because you start getting unbalanced. So I have my little T-Rex here, little T-Rex arms. If you're happy, clap your hands. We got a lot of churches that look like T-Rexes. They have this huge head, oversized noggin. We have hearts that, I'd say I call them medium-sized. Often we're often pretty good with taking care of the few people we know real well. And we have itty-bitty T-Rex arms. and we wonder why we're not building balanced disciples. Because our discipleship engine is not balancing. So you can do things like, I've heard at one church, they actually pulled together the young adults. They found out the young adults, golly gee, they were having all the fellowship meetings that you could ever imagine. They weren't really serving, and they hadn't learned a new thing about Jesus since, third grade. So they said, no more fellowship events. Actually, we'll let you have one this quarter. But in the meantime, we need to see leaders, because we're going to hold you as leaders accountable. We need to see your ministry plan for knowing, and we need to see your ministry plan for serving. And they rebalance. Why? Because it's an intentional priority. Now imagine if it was the preacher going in and telling them that. You'd run that preacher out on a rail, right? That's got to be a lay-led movement. So clergy, pastors, the lay leadership work together to figure out this plan and hold leadership accountable. Because let me tell you, as a clergy person, messing around in Sunday school is like a third rail. I mean, it could be worse. I could try to mess around with the choir or the UMW. Okay? I mean, that's a good way to get moved. But you're right. I mean, there's a reason why so many Sunday schools have their own bank accounts. Yeah. So anyway, think of that intentional discipleship in that way. So here's what I'd like to do. Real quick, pair and share. Turn to your neighbor, or triad at this table, I think. And I'd like you to spend 2 minutes talking about one thing you could do in your congregation's discipleship process to make it more intentional and balanced. One thing. And I'm going to give y'all 2.5 minutes. let's close out our time in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I heard a lot of chatter. It sounds like y'all have some things you want to change. That is awesome. So here's the big question for you. Are you actually going to lead that change? Are you going to lead that change? Are you going to have that conversation with your pastor, with the other leadership? Are you going to help them be more intentional, be more accountable, be more balanced so we don't create more T-Rex disciples with little bitty T-Rex arms and big noggins? So, all right, so that's and when you think about discipleship impact, you see the change that would happen. Think if you were to create a system that was more intentional and balanced like that, and contemplate that, and match that up with some stuff that you heard Phil and Kay talk about earlier, when he was talking about disciple Bible study is one of the tools that they had used, or some other tools. I'm not getting specific here on tools, but when you match that together, you notice you start a process like that. Imagine a few years later of building disciples. What happens to your fellow laity and their ability to make an impact? We live in an imagined world of scarcity. An imagined world of scarcity. Because we can only picture the resources that we have and the disciples that we have. Not understanding that our fellow members in the pews, they are not the final resources. They are the natural resources to be built upon, to be invested in, to be developed. And with a full church of developed disciples, I think you can take the lid off. God is waiting for you to work on it. God did not ask us to make members. We're asked to baptize disciples. So the next piece I want to talk about is relational impact, because we are in the relationship business. I need to tell you, I visit about 2 churches a week as a superintendent. On Sunday morning, I visit a lot of churches. But on Sunday morning, I'm usually in 2 different churches every Sunday morning. I want you to know that I have been told that every church in the Central District of the Arkansas Conference is friendly. They put it on, every one of them puts it on their paperwork. Now, I don't know about y'all's church, but I would guess you would call yourself friendly. I have not yet seen a church that filed paperwork of their ministry survey saying, well, we're actually very unfriendly. Now, so here's how I translate that. We are very friendly with the folks that we love and appreciate and that are family. We are, and most churches are polite to others. Now, I say most because when we come to passing the peace, I have shaken a hand, I've shaken another hand, and I have often just stood there for about 5 minutes. More times than you would ever imagine. I have stood there for 5 minutes. Maybe if my wife comes with me, she will be too. Just standing there. We're in the relationship business. No. I just show up. We limit the size of our church and our potential impact to reach new people when relationships are the business of the pastor. I've been one of those pastors where someone comes in and says, I see death. Tell me that. I'm not going to preach. I see guests. And I said, well, go say hi. And and so when we talk about especially small churches, I want to say, leverage the relational intimacy of the small church. That is God's gift to you in this season of your church's life, is to have relational intimacy. You can use that intimacy, and it can look like a blockade to anyone seeking to engage, or it can look like a gigantic welcome mat. That starts with y'all's souls. I was a preacher when it was a best polite church, and I could do all the welcoming. In fact, I'd gotten to the point, if I got in someone's living room, they joined. I had a horrible backdoor problem because the rest of the church never got them. I got in the living room, that's the last time they had a relational engagement with the church. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. For small churches especially, though, you have the opportunity to leverage that relational intimacy. Bring someone in. This is a great quote here. Actually, Kay wrote this as part of the book. People go anywhere to find friendliness, but most people are looking for something far beyond friendly. They're looking for a place to belong. They're looking for a group to do life with. Do life with. There's no good reason for anyone to show up in a church nowadays. It used to be, if you wanted to be a successful dentist in town, and you moved in, you need to join the biggest church possible. It was part of the social structure of a small town. That is not required, even in Arkansas. If someone walks through that door, there's something going on in their soul. There is a hunger that they can't explain. There is a loss they've experienced. There is a brokenness. There is something going on. And Christendom, all churches, get one chance. And if a church were to do anything other than embrace those folks fully, I would not want to be going up to the gates of heaven with that. Because we could end that person's opportunity to truly meet and grow in Jesus for the rest of their life, depending on our response. That ought to be breaking our hearts. So when I think about relational impact, there's lots of aspects. Hospitality. There's something, here's the lesson I learned. I realized something about my hospitality. I was really good at meeting everybody. What I was not good at, and I'm trying to get better at, is helping connect people. Does that make sense? Because the gold standard is not just to say, hey, Damien, it's great to meet you. Blessings. Hey, Kevin, good to meet you. That's lovely. But if I were to say, Damien, where are you from? Oh, have you met Kevin? And connect the two. Jim Osier in Clip In has a whole system. He and an executive from Southwest Airlines got together and wrote a book called Clip In. They actually have a tool called 5-10 Link. I love it. The 5-10 Link. Then anyone, the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of every worship service are about connecting. Every member needs to refrain from greeting the people they know and love, and instead make sure they're engaging others. The 10 refers to distance. Anyone passes that you don't know in 10 feet, you need to leave your group, and make sure they connect with them, and maybe gold standard, link, bring them back into the group. Have you met? I mean, again, I spend a lot of time in churches visiting. I have been linked a couple of times, but never as a disciple, only as a superintendent. My wife has never been linked with anyone. You know, they've never, oh, have you met? Or let me connect you. Never happened. Fascinating, huh? We ought to be the best at it. We're Christians. We ought to be the best at it. If Roman writers 2,000 years ago who were trying to tear us down and destroy us in our in our early baby state said, well, these Christians, look how they love. I would love to be called that today. Oh, these Christians, look how they love. Fellowship. I don't have a problem with fellowship events, but how are we doing them strategically? Are we basing all of our fellowship on the inward, or are we trying to invite others? Connections ministry. How to get a person new in to connect. These are all pieces that require intentional thinking on lay leadership. You cannot let the pastor run that system. You and the pastor need to sit down together and work through each of those kind of pieces and say, what shall be our process? How do we how do we train, equip our congregation to do this the way God needs us to? And try to make it simple. Like that 5-10 link. I have taught that so many different places because I can teach that thing and, well, you just heard it. I can do a full teaching of that in 3 minutes. It is the easiest system in the world. And keep on reminding, 5-10 link, 5-10 link, 5-10 link. And by the, it doesn't take a season, people start thinking about that and engaging others differently. The last piece I want to talk about, relational congregational care. So I'm serving in that little church, and we started growing, and God was really doing some amazing things there. But before I even got started, I had a phone call my first week. And it was her name was Liz, and she was one of our retired members, and she was saying she would go visit my mother in the hospital every week and take her communion. And she said, now my mom's a member of and I said, your mother? Oh, okay. Mother's over 100 at that time, actually. But she was a member at First Church. And I'm a little, I don't like to tread other people's memberships a little bit. This one, they've been saying, I'll call them and let them know as well, but let's talk. And I told Liz, I said, Liz, I just got here. I do not know what my expectations are going to be. I'm figuring that out. Or my time. I want to make sure that I care. Let's connect on this. How about you call me and we can set up visits every once in a while, and you and I together take communion to your mom. She goes, oh, okay. And I thought, well, I hope I didn't ruin this appointment. This guy, he's so important, he doesn't want to go visit people, Well, she called me back in about 2 weeks. She said, Blake, I've been thinking, is it okay if I start a congregational care program? Or she called it visiting or something, whatever. She said, you bet. We came up with a curriculum for lay chaplains together. We co-taught it. She ran it. She organized who's in charge. She sent me the note on who's visiting every week. She collected their reports. She offered the report. She ran it. And I think that was my Act 6 moment. I could have worked out of my own pastoral anxiety and said, oh, yes, how can I rescue? Yes, I'll go visit every week. If I had said that, I would have stolen ministry from Liz. And I would have stolen ministry from the 8 people that she got to do visits. Those folks had so much better visits than me. You don't know me real well. I'm kind of low on the mercy scale. But I tell you, I also had this whole cadre of chaplains. I got to the point I never did a visit by myself. If I had to go visiting, it wasn't an acute hospital visit, emergency, I went with one of those chaplains. Because I got to help grow another chaplain. They got to grow me as a better pastor. We got to visit together, and a 3-way communication was better than a 1-way. And that all made ministry work better. And it was more intentional, and I was that close from screwing it up. And I think for a lot of pastors, we're always that close to working out of our own anxiety instead of God's plan. And out of our own anxiety, we will hoard ministry. And it's not because we think we're better, it's because we're anxious. We're anxious. So when we think about relational impact, I also want to say community impact means relationship. I'm going to actually skip through a few of these. I'm going to move to missions. Oh yeah. So missions impact. Read that. Not really about what we do to or for. It's about how we build relationships with. So in that way, let me just tell you this, and I'm sorry for those trying to take a picture, but it's online. I hate blessing boxes. Okay, I'll chill out a little bit. If you want to have a blessing box, that's fine, wonderful, have at it. But here's the thing. I've seen too many churches use blessing boxes as excuses for not actually engaging the community. If you want to have a blessing box out there as a symbol that you're a church that cares and that you know that some people will get some food and they'll get some use, super. But understand that is just another version of checkbook charity. It's a nice sign, sure, but I've seen too many churches use it as excuses. And so let me compare the blessing box with another thing. I was taking a youth group to a Canvas community, a downtown church in Little Rock, that half the church population is homeless. It's a storefront church. It's an interesting world. I preached there last week. It was one more fascinating time. We had several mentally ill folks who started helping me in the sermon. I wasn't used to it. The pastor there just started laughing, saying, you learn how we do ministry now, huh, Blake? Yeah, I am. So I think a youth group. And so big old youth group. We had certain, you serve this, you serve this food. We're going to serve food. And the others are standing there. And then the deacon who's there at that church, Paul Atkins, he turns to the other youth and said, okay. And they're like, what's our job? Your job is I need each of you at a different table, and your job is to get to know our friends. And they freaked out. And he said, hey, I got you. And he shared with them how to do it. Because people need equipping. We're not used to talking with our homeless friends. I mean, what do you say? Where do you live? I mean, so you need to work out some of that. So he shared how to do it with both teams. They switched midway. Because let's be honest, a lot of places will hand out food. But God needed relationships to happen. We needed in Matthew 25 and Matthew 28 together. So, blessing boxes, sure. Please don't stop there. Checkbook charity is never a replacement for the good news of Jesus. Never. So, I don't have time for the share and share because I talk too much. Another thing I noticed, we were with another church, and they were doing this great event, and they do it twice a week. They do a food program. They do where you get bags of food. There's clothes. There's a whole system. So we came in. Everyone was lined up like a DMV, down to the numbers. Yeah, man. Everyone lined up. They had their numbers, and everyone's waiting. And the pastor was brand new. God, look at it. What do you think? Kind of looks like the DMV. It does. So we said, "What? Let's change it up." And she called me, and she said, "We changed it up." I was like, "Awesome, Patty. Great job." So now they're sitting at tables. They have folks from the church at every table connecting. And instead, and they said, we added a meal component, and you don't go walk through a line. Every person will be served. Every person will be served. I mean, and we're talking, you think, oh, that's a big old church. That church worship's 30. Worship's 30. It doesn't matter on church size, y'all. Actually, I say worship's 30. One reason they can pull it off, people invite their friends who are unchurched, that are friends, to come and serve. Think of the discipling opportunity there. So you're not just trying to work with that community. Every person that jumps in service, they're learning what it means to be a Christian before they even know this is a Christ-centered thing. Worship with impact. I'm going to have to get past. I'm sorry. The last piece is lay impact for governance. So, and I'll do this real quick, John, because I know that they're going to run out of tape or something, and y'all are hungry. Yeah. So, I use the metaphor of a playground when I talk about governance. Lay leadership need to step up on governance. One reason we don't do it well is because we've spread out all the committees. If any of you went to Keiko Tan's workshop on simplified structure, we wrote the book on it, you learned how you can have one committee that is the administrative. One committee is the church council, which is the finance committee, which is the trustees, which is staff parish. So instead of spreading out your structures, so everyone is in charge and no one is in charge, you have one committee that works in teams and partners with the pastor to make strategic decisions for the life of the church. That committee, I use the idea of the playground because I built a playground for a church. First thing you do, you got to get the site prepared and the fence around the edges. What's allowed in, what's allowed outside the playground. Outside is dangerous. The one of them I built with had a ditch in it. I do not want kids playing in the ditch. Parents will be mad about that. So inside the playground is safe. The pastor and the board work to define the fence. Along with the discipline's pretty good at that too. That's your outside fence. And then the board works with the pastor to set up some guidelines and policies that are internal for how do you go down the slide? Can you go head first? And then the pastor is in charge of communicating those to any staff, if there's any staff, or any ministry leaders. And so you think of it as hierarchical. The board's in charge, and the discipline is in charge of the outside fence. They work with the pastor for the internal rules, and then you let the ministry teams or staff do the rules on if you go down the slide head first. Kind of think of it smaller and smaller and tighter, with different levels of authority at each. You see the pieces, how it kind of condenses down. The board is not in charge of if you go down the slide head first. It's the staff and the ministry leader figure that out. The board's making sure what's inside or outside the fence. And within all that, have fun. You don't have to micromanage every decision. So that means lay leadership then can be a simplified and focus on the mission field, getting people out of meetings and into ministry, get all the resources aligned up. I'll be talking about that this afternoon. And get rid of bureaucracy. So, and 9 people can do that. So here's my check for you with accountable leadership. I fly a lot. You see these? So here's my question as we close. As leaders, y'all are all lay leaders, when's the last time you made a decision for the mission field that made you a little queasy? If your decisions are very easy, you're not challenging yourself. You haven't pulled these out yet. So my challenge for you, as lay leaders, many of you sit on the board, grab the flight bag, set it in the middle, and say, are we queasy yet? Let's get a little more to the edge. Let's get queasy. When's the last time you shut down a ministry intentionally? Ooh, now you're meddling, right? You said, when's the last time you had a funeral for a ministry? Well done, good and faithful ministry. It worked out well. It needs to stop. Because God's got a bigger next step for us. That's the kind of air sickness bag decision that your board's going to have to be making. The last piece before we go is a new pastor's showing up. We're in a Methodist system, new pastors showing up every year. If I, as a superintendent, I keep on hearing, well, we're waiting to figure out who the new pastor is, and then we'll get on our visioning and our mission and all that. If you wait for that new pastor, you've already waited. You've waited too long. You're the experts. if you hear a new pastor's coming, you need to first know thyself and know thy neighborhood. Be ready to articulate who your church is. If you know in March, start talking to that new pastor in March. Start planning how you're going to enter with this, and then start agreeing amongst yourselves, how are we going to help this pastor engage the community? Because the pastor walks in and they've got all their stuff and there's way too many books and they don't know anybody and anything and they're meeting y'all, and you will soak up that pastor's time. And then meanwhile we get some people saying, well, you need to join the Rotary Club. Well, I don't know if I need to or not. So instead, I have a system. I say to these staff parishes, now in some towns, yeah, that's the one club. But in most of them, you're a member of the Rotarians, you're a member of Kiwanis, you're a member of the Bikers for Jesus group, you're a member of the Quilting Bee. I need all of you to invite the pastor to whatever circle of people you have networked. And at the ball game. I do not want a pastor going by themselves to a ball game. They need to go with somebody. Your job as staff parish or the board or the leadership is to find the people who are a part of all these networks and then have the pastor to come with you, and then your job is to say, have you met our new pastor? The pastor should never be the first one running out there. If they're new, that's an opportunity for networking. Have you met our new pastor? It's magic language, y'all, because now you're showing also how to do 5-10 link. Okay, last thing, and then you're going. Pair and share. How are you going to walk across the street? What street do you need to cross in your church? Real quick, 1 minute, one sentence. I want you to close your eyes, think about it. What's one street you need to cross? What's next step for impact? Now I want you to turn to your neighbor, and each of you take a turn saying your one thing, one sentence you're going to do. Next step. Ready? Go. Okay, thank you so much for being with us. That sounded like a lot more than one sentence, which is even more awesome. So as we close today, 2 things. Let me hawk my book, Impact with Kay Cotan. Also, The Mission Possible. Kevin has them up there at the Market Square booth. But really, here's what I want to say. My real prayer for y'all is that you make a kingdom-sized impact for Jesus Christ. So as you go forth from here, keep on praying over the change that God needs you to make, knowing it starts with your own discipleship. In Christ's holy peace, go forth.